I'm Devon Riley, and I'm living in Portland, Oregon. It's my home. After I graduated from Columbia University, I made my way circuitously to a life in yoga. I had been practicing Ashtanga, and I was looking for a bartending job, because that's what you do when you're an Ashtangi who just graduated from Columbia University. And I found a couple bartending jobs. And I also, in my search for a bartending job, bumped into this studio that I had no idea was there. It was in the West Village. And it was downstairs was East West Bookstore, which was just this crazy, clotted, ancient, rotting collection of amazing books run by this old Indian guy. And upstairs from that was the New York branch of the Himalayan Institute for Yoga, Science, and Philosophy, is what the full title used to be. And I can't remember now how I ended up upstairs. I feel like in there was just a little door next to East West Books. I must have just randomly walked down that street because I ended up with several bartending jobs in the West Village. There was I bet there was a sign on the door. They would have done it that way, just a random sign on the door that said that they needed help. And I had resumes in my hand, and I went upstairs. And I actually know this story only because I recently spoke to Nishit, who was my teacher there, and he said, you came upstairs and you came out of the elevator, and I said to you, you're going to work for me now. And you said, how did you know I was coming? And I think I cried. I think that's what he said I did. I don't remember. But I think he, in his recent email to me, said that I cried, which would not surprise me in the least. And so then I worked for him and had 2 bartending jobs. And it was a really interesting time, and I worked for him for about a year in close quarters and companionship. And he definitely felt himself to be called to be a mentor for me. And I was slightly more reluctant about it. And by the end of that first, really only 9 months that I worked for him, he had convinced me that I needed to do the teacher training through the Himalayan Institute at their headquarters in Huntsdale, Pennsylvania. And I had agreed that I would do that, but that I wasn't going to work for him anymore. And he said, it's fine, you'll teach for me. And I did end up teaching for him, but only for about 6 months after I finished the training in Huntsdale. And that piece, the piece of doing the training, ended up causing me circuitously to meet my husband. So there was a lot that happened then. But I've taught pretty consistently in all the places I've lived since then. And that was 13 years ago. I think we're all searching for inspiration all the time in our lives. And sometimes you feel almost overwhelmed by inspiration, and sometimes there's kind of a dry spell. And I had sort of a dry spell in my teaching from, really it began maybe with the trip we took to India, which I think happens for a lot of yoga teachers. I was not going to India to try to get, to practice or to teach, but I was still really stunned by how little being there connected me to the direction of my practice or to inspiration. And then a lot of other things happened, and I had my daughter, my first daughter, and we lived on a farm, which was very inspiring, but not really in my practice. And then I started teaching after my daughter was born, and I was teaching in a new town, and I really loved the students that I was meeting, and it was all really interesting, but I was really teaching from ancient knowledge, from previous sources. And then I just stepped into the river. And there were so many sources, and there have been since then so many sources. And I really have to wonder if, like, you get that sense that the dry spell was like this critical thing, this important piece, because so much of the inspiration I've had since then has really come from the periphery of my knowing. I'm inspired by learning about pain and what pain does in the body and in the mind. So in the last couple of years, I've done some intensive study around pain, around developmental movement, around I'm not even sure how to say it, non-mainstream populations and their perspectives, prejudice, privilege. And also, I've really come back into contact with my own scoliosis. So not very long after I started practicing yoga, I was developing scoliosis. I developed it in my teenage years, like so many women with scoliosis do. And due to a freak kidney stone x-ray, I was told by a doctor that I had scoliosis when I was maybe 14. And, given like a little heel pad to carry around and put in my shoes, which lasted about a week. And that was kind of the end of that conversation. It disappeared. And right around when I became pregnant with my second child, I started really paying attention in my practice, in my pregnancy, because pregnancy heightens the same hormones that turn idiopathic adolescent onset scoliosis on in the teenage years. I became aware of it as a part of who I am. Maybe for the first time. A lot of the center work that I'm offering came in part, I've been looking for ways to blend my old education, my really classical education from the Himalayan Institute, with my more modern anatomical felt sense developmental education. Those both really inspire me and touch me, and I want to honor some of the early gifts that I was given. And in my bed, being able to connect to myself in ways that didn't need to get rid of the other sensations and the limitations and the truth of being afraid that those limitations are only going to grow. But also was not dependent on them. For a while now, I've been a teacher of injured people, not because I set myself up as such, but for whatever reason, because of what I'm interested in, because my classes tend to move more slowly, because of an Iyengar focus, because I'm really interested in proprioception, in being able to feel yourself. I've had my classes kind of fill up, also because my classes tend to be smaller, and it's easier for me to have a hands-on listening relationship. Maybe also because I've done a lot of anatomical study, and I can understand when people are explaining what's wrong. But I get to see some good friends on a regular basis whose practices are shaped by their bodies in a way that has to do with pain. If they're not really listening, then they're going to have more pain. And the demands of both being able to be in pain and still be present, and also of being able to navigate your practice and come back to a place that last time hurt you requires just a ton of courage. And I do find that these students of mine, they come and then they have to leave for a while because it's really not working and they're inflamed and it's just like they just can't even show up. And then they start to come back, and they're not back because they think that it's going to fix it. They just want to come. In conversations with a really good friend of mine, we refer to the center, we go like this. And it didn't start from a conversation about practicing. She comes to yoga classes with me. It didn't start out of, the idea wasn't there first. We were talking about parenting. It's so easy to lose your way, to lose your feeling of center, to be pulled around. And she was saying, I think maybe just about saying no. Like when you say no and you're like this, your no is like this. And when you say no and it's like this, like a shitty, slidey pile of blocks, it's gonna go down. Your no is gonna go down. Like any pressure down on the top of the no, and you're done. You're done for. And that's, like when I'm so interested in the psoas because it feels like that. The no feels like that. The being in the center feels like that. It's not rigid. It's supple. There's space. There's responsiveness. There's freedom to move into a different space. But you feel wrapped up. I think one of the pieces, the difference between a no that you can push down on and a no that you can't, is the connectedness, the feeling of being really connected. And that's, there's a million kinds. The sureness of connection with yourself, where you won't be annihilated. Connection with ancestors, connection with the teachings, whatever your teachings are. But I think it feels like when you're eating something and it tastes like you wanted it to taste, and you cooked it, and you touched the food all the way through, and you're putting it back in, it feels like you're in the middle of the cycle. I feel really grateful to be able to learn currently from Amy Matthews and Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, sort of through Amy Matthews. I have a teacher in Portland named Todd Jackson, Kira Ryder. I learned so much from books. I love books. I learned so much from books. I'm learning a lot. Michael Stone. I saw Michael Stone recently, and I was feeling pretty cynical about yoga's ability to reach out into the wider world, about the yoga cultures, not yoga itself, but the yoga culture's ability to reach out and connect. And seeing Michael Stone really helped me with that. I've been reading a lot of Michael Remski, and I feel the same way about that. An ability to really hold all the separate pieces and not need to reconcile them and not need to erase any of them. I do think that really the main thing that I want to say in terms of encouragement is that I don't think you can get kicked out. I don't think you can fail at your practice. The reason why being in your center feels like being at the center of the cycle is because you're always at the center of the cycle. And when you can feel it, then you know.